This episode is brought to you by Adaptive. Adaptive is an AI technology that we use for all our cash flow management. If you're in construction, you know how difficult this is. The days of importing all your invoices, cost coding them, asking 10 people in your office where they get coded, is this job approved, is this invoice approved, making notes, all of that is now done through AI. Your invoices get automatically uploaded. After that, all you have to do is cross-check its accuracy per the jobs. This is now saving us hours per job per month because with a click of a button, you can now have the draw process automated, which has been a complete game changer. On top of that, it's going to track your lien waivers as well as your certificates of insurance, making sure that everyone is in compliance before their bills are paid. This is saving us hours and hours per job per month, all with a click of a button. If you want to know more, check out adaptive.build. Additionally, we interviewed Matt Calvano on episode 15 of the Curious Builder Podcast. You can find out more about it on our website as well at thecuriousbuilderpodcast.com.
Warroad is an important part of Marvin. Without the community, there would have been no Marvin. The community stuck by us during hard times. We stuck by the community during hard times.
Welcome to the Curious Builder Podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host. Today we're joined by Christine Marvin from Marvin Windows and Doors. Welcome, Christine.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Well, I just got back from Warroad about a month or two ago, so the timing of this interview is awesome because I have all these amazing tour questions to ask you. And I think while I was wandering around town, you're building your own personal home right now? Is that right?
I'm in the building process.
The
last 30 days of it.
Oh, wow. Okay,
yeah.
So you're moving in soon.
We're nearing the end.
I bet you're really excited.
We're really excited, and the boys are excited. So the goal is to get in before Labor Day.
Yep.
Because school starts the day after. So we want to be moved in to start the new school year in the new home.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's exciting. Now, you've had other homes up there, I assume, prior to this home?
I am living in the home I grew up in Warroad. So I've been born and raised in Warroad.
Yep. Went
to college, lived outside of Warroad for 15 years. And then when my husband and I had our first son, we moved home.
Okay. Amazing. Isn't it? It's so funny building homes, obviously, for people myself. It's like a lot of times you get people that transplant away and then all of a sudden family starts happening. You're like, hey, I really miss home. And like home is you go where all your family is.
It's been a big deal for my husband and I to be close to family because I don't know how you can do it without, we're so dependent on friends and family, and it does take a village.
It does. How many children do you have?
Well, it makes it sound like I have 10. I have 2.
2. Hey, they're very active, so that's all
they're
good.
2 active boys.
That's funny. We were actually just out in Bozeman, Montana for a wedding last weekend. Actually, an architect friend of mine got married. He's our neighbor as well. And I love Montana. And as we're out there, it was just my wife and I, and we have 3 kids. And I was like, hey, what do you think about moving out here? And we like the classic, you're driving down the road, you're kind of in nostalgia, like, hey, yeah, let's just do a fresh reset. Let's move to Montana. And then we get to the family part, and you're like, wait a minute, our family is like, 15 hours away. And so anyway, you always come back to, you want to go where your family is.
Yes. And where the family is and where the company is.
Yep. Yeah. Well,
so
for
for
sure.
us.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about, for those listening, obviously we're a statewide podcast and now a national-wide podcast as we've gone weekly. Everyone in Minnesota is going to know who Marvin is, but I suspect there's some outside of Minnesota that probably doesn't know Marvin. So tell us a little bit about the Marvin story, because it's a pretty captivating story.
So my great-grandfather from southern Minnesota, in 1904, he moved up to the Canadian border. So Warroad, our town, is situated 6 miles south of the Canadian border on Lake of the Woods. And he came up there to manage the Canadian grain elevator. By 1912, it was his own lumber and cedar company. And in the late 30s, early 1940s, my grandfather saw an opportunity to expand the business, but primarily motivated by giving jobs to friends that were coming home from the war. And
World War II or World War I?
It had been World War II.
Okay.
And it wasn't so much about windows and doors, but there was an idea and a capability we could make barn sash. And that's the birth of the window and door company we know today. And Marvin has been headquartered in Warroad since the beginning.
I mean, it's pretty amazing. You drive up there and, the town, it's not going to get renamed, I assume, although I'm sure at some point people have thought about it, because it's amazing. Everywhere you look, there's yellow and black branding everywhere. And then obviously, I assume the majority of the population, is surrounded in that community, works with and for Marvin. Is that true?
We are one of the major employers up in northwestern Minnesota. And so in a town of, I think the sign currently says 1,830 residents of Warroad, we employ nearly 2,000, but you pull in from a surrounding area,
Sure.
from the county, and
Yeah.
that's our workforce. But it's now just one of, I think, roughly 16 locations across the country.
Right, because you've got your new plant, and maybe we'll talk about that in a little bit. The modern windows are out of Fargo, is that right, or near that area?
Correct.
Yep.
We have several product lines that are manufactured in Fargo, North Dakota.
Okay, excellent.
Fargo and West Fargo.
And West Fargo. Oh, yeah. We don't want to offend the West Fargoans. One of the things that I thought was so appealing being up there and going through the museum and learning a little bit more about George's life and history was, and correct me on the details here, was I think early on was he at the grain mill, someone asked him if was it the paper the pulp or like the tree order, and it was a Boise Cascade that said, hey, we need like 30,000 loads. And he basically just said yes, and then figured out how to do it after, and basically got his baseball team and everyone in town to help him basically do it. Is that roughly the...
You know what? You may know our Marvin history better. That sounds familiar, but I think what resonates more than anything is this idea of saying yes. And then figuring it out. And there's been like a lot of moments throughout Marvin's life where we've said yes and we figured it out because it's something that provided jobs, opportunity, or it was something that customers requested.
Right. I mean, that's true. I mean, even this podcast, I started the podcast and just started saying yes to every opportunity, trying to figure it out. And I certainly, in sales and having my own company, I think everyone can relate to just saying yes and figuring it out on the back end. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that really shows the entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah, I think so too.
Because it seemed like he had a lot of things. So he had, I mean, in your grandpa, he had the hardware store. I mean, basically, it just kept expanding. Whatever the community needed, he kept creating, from what I can tell.
Yeah, what the community needed, again, providing jobs, but also then it evolved based on what the customers wanted, or even what the customers couldn't communicate they wanted. But I think about dealers who, I mean, they would carry inventory of windows and doors. So this goes back 70 years. And so they're sitting on a lot of cash, a lot of inventory. And so how do you actually help the dealer free up cash flow? And a little bit of that was born the made to order story. So instead of a dealer ordering and stocking, it's like, let's not make the windows until the order is placed.
Sure.
And that helps with their cash flow. So there's been a lot of examples throughout history of like listening to your customer, whether it be homeowner, architect, builder, or your dealer, and then designing services, experience, and products that meet their needs.
One thing that's pretty interesting you say about saying yes. I mean, I was impressed when we went up there. We got to fly up there because Marvin has a aviation center out of Minneapolis that flies up out of Warroad. Tell us a little bit about how that came to be. I think it's pretty unique. I mean, for those not familiar with Minnesota geography, Minneapolis, we're probably what, a 6-7 hour drive?
Well, with kids, I swear sometimes it's 9 or 10 hours. But if you're going the speed limit, it's about 6 to 6.5 hours to the northwest corner. And so when you're thinking about getting out as a sales individual back in the 70s or 80s when we were going more national, I mean, we needed a way to transport people down to the cities, but we also wanted opportunities to bring suppliers, but most importantly, customers up to Warroad to see how the product's being made and to experience Marvin. And I believe that the first plane, it was a Piper Aztec, was purchased in July of 1976, the first plane. And now 2023, and we have several in the fleet. But, we employ 7,000 individuals right now. Again, Warroad, remote and rural, is still headquarters. And so today we bring employees, we bring partners, we bring so many customers.
Yeah, like
You're
myself.
An example.
Yep.
Up to Warroad to experience it.
Yeah, I mean, kudos to Dale. I'm sure he'll listen to this podcast. He's been trying to get me to go up there for years, and he finally got me up there. And it is. I can see. I was just actually having coffee this morning with a sales rep from Cambria, another Minnesota company, and we were just talking about how impressive it is to see facilities. And I think if there's something I could say to the audience, and just I think anyone that is curious, spend some time to go see where things are manufactured, people that you work with regularly. I've always been curious about it, but now with the podcast, I even have a double incentive, both as a builder, but now just to see how people essentially produce the things that we're putting in our homes. And I'm just marveling at how amazing these processes are, and like walking through Marvin's factories and, seeing, the craftsmanship and some of the production changes. Obviously, how do you keep, you would know how many windows you're producing a day, but the amount of wood that's flying, and a fairly clean, very robust cleaning system, how they reharvest the wood, how they use it for heaters, just the assembly lines, mainly because I've just never been part of a, big manufacturing. So to me, it's like really cool to walk in there and be like, oh, wow, this is American made ingenuity at its best. Like, how does this all, and then as you continue to add on to your facilities, it's just really impressive for especially a small builder like myself to see, these big companies that support us and excuse me, make our homes look beautiful. But, to see it, how it's made is really interesting.
So what was another key takeaway for you from your time in Warroad or in the Marvin facility? Something that's surprised you that...
Yeah, I think by far the most appealing thing to me, and I'm a sentimental person, I think is just the community aspect. I think that more than anything, I was just impressed at the community web, from your grandfather to the family, to everyone in the community, and just the support that you have this small town. And, just as a business owner, something logistically, you'd say, man, hey, at what point do you move this company to a place that has a big city center? And obviously somewhere along the line, the family said, no, we are Warroad and Warroad is us. And we are going to basically, we're going to put our stake in the ground and make it wonderful. I think that is a really neat testament, because you can't fake that. That's real. And I think if that's your culture, what does that say about your window product? And sometimes you might not even have to say anything, because like just telling your story is, I keep telling that story because I'm impressed by it. And a lot of companies have it, but yours is it's pretty amazing how you guys have been able to continue to cultivate that. And then I would say on a production level, your corporate offices are extremely, they just got redone, I assume, and they're gorgeous. So
and they have lots of Marvin in it, lots of product.
Yeah, when you were just redoing all the modern windows. And so that was really beautiful to see. We actually put those on a project a year and a half ago. So
you did?
Yep, so on a lake up here in Medicine Lake. And so it was really cool to see them in the corporate center and have some, familiarity with putting them in my own one of the homes that we built recently. But I'd say from a production standpoint, just seeing how, how the CNC machines are cutting, just the lack of waste. And I've seen it in cabinet shops, how they lay everything out. But you guys are dialing so far into efficiencies and craftsmanship. But one thing that was a little surprising that I think people wouldn't maybe know is there's still a lot of handwork that is done on on windows. And I think in a day and age where we think everything could probably be print pressed or ejected molded or something like that, your window is still, in my opinion, a really highly customized, handmade thing. Now, I know you guys are pre-making sashes. Obviously, we can talk a little bit about glass and where that comes from, but especially when you get into like the arch windows or the specialty windows, there was like a whole floor, a team of these incredible artists working on these windows, and you're like, wow. I know that the tree doesn't come in a bend like that, and I'm making, but like to see it being produced is very impressive. Yeah. So those were the three things I think that really stood out to me.
Well, I'm glad you were able to make it up there and during the summer, because it is beautiful up there in the summer months.
Yeah, the whole area, and yeah. So anyway, everyone listening, get out to whoever you work with. I think it's just important to see how the soup is made, and I think it's really impressive. One of the questions that I had for you was, how old did you ever get to meet your grandpa?
I did.
You did,
and it was actually really special. So I worked with my father and my uncles and aunts, so I had that opportunity to work with Generation 3, and then Generation 2 was my grandfather, who started the window and door part of it. And at the time when I came back to the company in my 20s. He was in his late 80s and early 90s. So he still went to work every day. He read the newspaper. He'd pop into some meetings. But the thing that he did is he spent time meeting with customers. Someone would push him up in his wheelchair. He would look at everyone's name badges, look at their name, where they're from, had some questions. And so what I didn't have was those moments necessarily in the board meetings, right? Or in a shareholder meeting, or in the actual business planning meetings. But I did have that overlap, and I think one of my most special memories was at the International Builder Show. It probably would have been in 2007 or 2008, and it was one of the last ones he attended. And I have a photo with Grandpa and a few of my cousins, at the show, and it was just kind of a special milestone moment.
I mean, that's tremendous. How, I mean, talk a little bit about that. Like when you are a kid growing up, like obviously you're in a small town of War Road. What's it like to have your name kind of everywhere? And I'm not from a really small town, but I'm guessing, I mean, obviously everyone would know everybody, but does it matter that you're a Marvin or you just become a member of the community? How does that nuance work when so much of War Road is tied into, the Marvin name brand? As a child, did you feel that, or you just kind of felt like you were just any other kid?
Well, I think as a kid, you don't know
You
any
don't know.
differently.
Yeah.
It's this is my life. This is my experience. I had the best childhood. I loved growing up in World, and it's actually really special for me to see my children now have so many of the same experiences as well. What I did come to realize is that the building does have your name, and you don't really know what that means except you work hard, you treat with people with respect, and there were standards or expectations on how you would show up, but I think it was just being a good person more than anything at the end of the day. But you knew that with the name came a responsibility, if that makes sense. But you don't really fully appreciate it, I think, until you get a little bit older,
Well,
and can look at it from a different perspective.
Well, and imagine too, as a parent, you could, I mean, even now, it's funny to me. I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel like as a parent now of 3 kids, business changes how I view things totally now through the eyes of having children too. And I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just maturity or age or whatever, but especially in a family-run business where you have a lot of other family. And I've had I had a husband I've had husband and his wives on in the show before, and it's interesting to see how they navigate. Do you stop talking about it on the nights and weekends? Do you take it home with you? How have you guys navigated, as an expansive family in the business? How often do you talk about it? How, is there?
It's a good question. It's part of you. It's part of your identity. I think my husband works for the company.
Okay.
And so we don't talk about it too much at night because even though our minds are probably going, but it's important that I think we show up for our kids. And quite honestly, you need a break. And there's other parts and dimensions of your life that are important to nurture as well. In terms of the kids, we do expose them to the business and we teach them about it. My husband's an engineer, and I can tell my 2 kids are nothing like me, and they're probably a little bit more like my husband. And they're interested. They're interested in how things work. They're interested in my husband designs product, and I think they are just fascinated. So they ask questions, and that's nice when they invited in to be able to share. There are moments in the community where we do volunteer work. And then one day every year, we bring G3, which would be my parents' generation, G4, and now G5. There's like 40 some in Generation 5 to War Road. And it's an opportunity for like social relationships, but it's also an opportunity based on your age to engage in learning. Like this year, actually on Friday,
Oh, wow.
is our reunion of sorts, but you learn about the family tree. You learn a little bit about the company. If you're 18 and older, you might learn a little bit more in depth about the company and the brands, right? And the business itself. And so we try to tailor curriculum and learning opportunities that are fun and informative based on your age. So my kids participate in that 100% and lean in and love it.
I mean, that'd be amazing, especially the fact that you get to do it once a year and keep these cool family ties as people, I assume, still not everyone, like what percentage of the whole family network would still live in War Road versus, I'm sure not every single Marvin is obviously in the company. There'd be some that obviously do other jobs as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So probably, less than 15% that live in, but my cousin, he's the CEO.
Yeah.
He doesn't, he has 6 children.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
that's it takes a big percentage, but
yeah.
It's the reason, though, that we're really intentional about these moments is because now we have family members that live and work in the Twin Cities or in Fargo or in Denver, Colorado. And so we're not all growing up in War Road anymore. And so it's important that we come back. And what I loved is that we have several of the G5s are now teenagers and in college. And several of them came back to War Road to work this summer. They lived with grandma and grandpa or, friends, and they worked in production or worked as a communication writer. So they have the opportunity to actually immerse too.
I can't imagine how happy your grandpa would be at seeing that ripple effect of have, because the one thing that you observe, I mean, even at a younger age, I'm 42, but as you look at older generations, the thing that makes them the happiest is just having family together. So the idea that you could have a business and a community, and I mean, it would thrill me. So I can only imagine what it's like for all your family
Oh,
to have that.
it's really special. And one thing, just the other day, we had Generation 5 G5s that were interns or worked at Marvin. They did like a capstone report on just what they learned, not about maybe the job, but maybe about the importance of trust or social relationships at work and building a network. And I could not believe every single presentation was incredible. And I kind of looked at my cousins and I said, I don't know if we would have shown up like this,
Right.
When we were in high school or college. So it's really exciting to see the passion and the understanding of the next generation coming in. It's like, okay, we're in good hands.
Right. That is amazing. How have you guys navigated? I mean, you have a legacy now and your family kind of hands it down to the next one. Do you guys have certain principles that have helped usher that? That like how do you ensure that people continue to bring new ideas and that the company idea train won't kind of flatline, if you will?
There's two things to that. Maybe I'll go to the first thing as far as like the family succession planning. There's like it from an ownership perspective, but then also from a leadership perspective. And both are important, that we stay family owned and that we stay family led. On the ownership piece, probably the single most important thing that we can point to as to like why we're making it into the fifth generation is that you have to make a decision by the age of 33, whether or not you're going to work for the company full time. And if you're not, that is okay. But it also means that you're not a shareholder in the company anymore. Because the idea of you work full time and you're invested in the long term. And that's how you participate in ownership at Marvin. So spouses can work there, but they're not owners. But those are some of the factors that have enabled the focus to be like on the business and the business to get passed forward. But then on I'm going to call it the management and leadership side of it, it's a bigger company now. And so we have a blend of family leadership and non-family leadership for the board.
Sure.
And then with the management and executives at Marvin. And we say we're better for that. It's really powerful when you can have the blend, because as a company grows and we don't always have those experiences, you can bring in expertise, people who appreciate the values of the company, what we make, love the company as much as we do, and then they can contribute their talents to the company. And so that blend of family and non-family at the board and then at the leadership level is really important.
Interesting. What, out of curiosity, the 33 years, how was that number arrived upon?
I don't know the math and the exact thinking that took place in the it was in the 1980s that was established as our generation 4. We were born, we were growing up. I think the idea was it's not mandated, but it allows you to get some experience outside of the company first. And so those outside experiences are invaluable. It allows you to finish schooling. It allows you to start a family and get established. And so why 33 and not 29, I don't know, but
This episode is brought to you by Alpine Hardwood Flooring. They've been our partner now for over a decade, installing all our wood floors on all our new homes as well as our remodels. And on a personal level, Adam and Anthony Jenkala, the owners, are just absolutely amazing people. They've been so supportive of my career as well as doing anything we need to make sure that our clients are happy. And they work so well with our other vendors and trade partners at not only protecting their product, but also ensuring everyone else's looks great. So if you're looking for a wood floor or for a refinish, I highly recommend Alpine Hardwood Flooring. Find them at alpinehardwoodmn.com or alpinehardwoodmn on Instagram. This episode is brought to you by Pella Northland. For 19.5 years, I've been building homes, and 95% of all of my homes have used Pella windows. I couldn't be happier to call them a partner in our builds and our remodels. Whether you're an architect, a designer, or a remodeler, I'd highly recommend Pella windows. They can fit old homes, new homes, reclaimed, commercial, and really everything in between. Pella is a company that we trust and that we recommend to our clients. Additionally, in management, Peter and Ed have just been absolute fantastic people to work with, as well as mentors to me personally. So when it comes time to look for a window, I'd highly recommend Pella windows. Find more at pellanorthland.com. Also, if you're interested, you can hear episode 1 where I interview Peter and Ed together for a great listen on business and Pella windows. Well, it's funny because the first thing, for whatever reason, it came to me was, I'm happen to be a Christian, but Jesus was 33 years old, when he died.
That's really interesting.
And I'm curious, just being a northern town, I assume there's a strong faith in small towns. I don't know if that to be true or not, but I'm just curious, like how far back that, because he obviously was preaching the gospel for a few years before he, so anyway, I don't know. That was the first thought that came to my mind. So it'd be interesting this Friday, actually, when you talk to your
the family,
to G2 and G3, throw that out there. See what they say.
See what they say.
Because I could see how that would. Anyway, it's just more of a side note.
It's actually really interesting. What's one of my favorite things about this? We call it G5 Day, but it's not G5.
Yeah.
Is that we have our G3, so my dad's generation still around, and they participate and they play window bingo with us, and we have a little bit of history, and it's a wonderful way of sharing and learning and capturing those stories.
Yep. So that they make it to the next generation.
They make it.
Yep.
They make it.
The reason I brought up the question is we had Mark Shear from Shear Brothers on, who you obviously know.
Yes, Mark.
And he had told their family story, which I keep saying the story because if I end up having family that was, I'm third generation, but it was like disjointed.
Was there a skip in there?
Well, no, just that I knew I did not want to be a builder. My dad was a builder. My mom was a designer. I'm like, I want nothing to do with being a builder. They retired, and 4 years later, I'm like, I should be a builder. So then I started a company. So but each generation is they've almost kind of needed to do their own thing. So while I have 3 generations of being builders in our family, it's like each person had to do it on their own. I'm not sure what that says about
and
our family.
Arrive there on their own.
Yeah, and I think their own journey. And so where I was going with this is Shear Brothers has a deal where they couldn't work for the company for like 5 years or like a major promotion, and the whole concept was to increase, outside thought and get a major promotion to bring new blood. So that basically, just because your last name was Williams or Shear or Marvin, that you couldn't just come into the company. You had to also do some things. And I think you kind of answered that by you have the ownership and the leadership. Those are 2 different things. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of where I was going at with that question.
I understand. One of the things that I think was pivotal for me is that I went to grad school in Colorado, and right when I was graduating, our West Coast distributor purchased the Mountain distributor. So what that meant is that there was a new vision, new strategy, and there are opportunities. And so I ended up working for our distributor that sold Marvin. So I didn't work for Marvin directly. Mm-hmm. But for several years, I worked in sales in the Mountain region as a territory manager. And that has shaped my whole career. So while it was outside of Marvin, it was close. But, I said my last name's Marvin, but guess what? I don't know product to the extent that I can train on it. And they invested in me. So I learned our systems. I learned about our product, and all of that experience when I came back to Marvin it actually helped me so much think about marketing in a new way, telling the value proposition, telling the stories, and I also understood the product. And it opened up a door for me to get engaged with product on the product management and product development side. So I found a good track that has, again, served me so well in my career. And so I'm forever grateful for them taking that chance on me because they didn't have to.
Right.
But they did.
So you actually touched on something I wanted to ask you later, but I'll ask it now. Some window companies sell direct. Some go through distributors, like you just mentioned.
Yes.
What not being in part of manufacturing or understanding kind of the nuances of that, does one make more sense than another, or why? Walk us a little bit through, like, as a business leadership team, why is one, for Marvin in particular, like we buy, if we're going to buy Marvin, we'll buy through, let's say, Shear Brothers,
yes.
or we'll buy through a lumber yard locally here. And I don't know if that changes throughout the company, because can you buy through Marvin directly or only through essentially a distributor?
We go through we call them dealers.
Dealers. Sorry.
And they can be lumber yards, specialty design centers. Excuse me. And the reason for that is that Marvin is a specialized product. Mm-hmm. We don't do anything in the stock. We don't sell through big box. So the value we extend is best served through that local dealer who knows
their clients.
And they know the market, and they can represent the product well and find the right product for the right application. And so that's how we choose to go to market across the country.
Okay. I was always curious about that because, not being in a, worldwide distribution, how that works. So
Yeah, the independent dealer is so important to Marvin. It's really an extension of Marvin in the market.
I mean, for lack of a better analogy, thinking back of your grandpa having the hardware store. I mean, I think of these little hardware stores, someone comes in off the farm and wants something like that hardware store owner knows that
That's
hey,
right.
Bob the builder needs this, that, and another thing in whatever climate he's in.
Mm-hmm. And those are, I mean, for the dealer, those are their customers because a dealer also packages their own value. Mark is packaging his own value when he's engaging with the builder, and we recognize that and value that.
Yeah, interesting. Tell us, we'll come back a little bit to business stuff just because I always find that our listeners really like to understand business and marketing, which is kind of your expertise. So even your title is interesting. It says Chief Marketing and Experience Officer. I think the part that caught me was the Experience Officer. What does that mean exactly?
Well, I'm giving definition to what it means as we go here. But so I came back into a marketing role just within the past 2 years. And I do believe that the role of someone in marketing is marketing plus. Right now, we're in a world where experiences matter, engagement with a brand, with a company, the products you make, how you reach, but those experiences that you create as a brand in reaching the dealer, the architect, the builder. And I think there are ways at Marvin, what I'm really excited to do is start to understand the journeys our customers go through. When I say customer, there's quite a few players in the ecosystem, and I think you know that.
Yeah, I do.
I mean, even your relationships that you have with architects and what have you, and there's such an opportunity to understand the overall experience, how people come together, their separate journeys, their pain points, and for us to ensure that we're delivering upon and reducing those pain points, and we're finding more moments of joy, delight, ease, and frictionless experiences. And so based on some experiences that I've had, and then moving back into the marketing role, I just feel like that's a growing opportunity just in the world and an area that I'd love for Marvin to lean in and amplify the opportunity of service and experience as part of the brand. It's been part of our value proposition, but things have changed, right? The definition of what service is or experience. And so it's on us to activate it. It's a very, very important part of our brand in addition to product.
I was curious to see where you're going to go with that because I wrote storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And so right now I'm really passionate about working with crafters or working something that tells a story.
Yes.
And I think experience is just another word for storytelling. And since it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like experiences you want to gather let's say for me, I'm a custom home builder. So I could share my experience of how, in this case, let's say Marvin Windows supports me and supports our clients or makes them look good or whatever manufacturer I'm working with. And then from the client's point of view, what is their experience? Because ultimately, a builder may or may not be there depending on how old they are, depending on if they have a legacy.
That's right.
I think one thing that would be a very powerful sales tool for Marvin is, whether, Mark or his kids or, they just keep starting new building companies evidently without the same name. But, Marvin's going to be here continually. And I think any brand that offers that, longevity, is a very powerful statement. How are you capturing or not enforcing, but how are you leveraging, you mentioned leaning in, how are you leaning in a practical way to, experience? Like how are you marketing that?
So marketing, not so much marketing.
Okay,
it's more of a doing muscle right now and establishing the strategy of where we think there's opportunity, then operationalizing it. So we have a team at Marvin. It's called the Marvin Design Lab.
Yeah.
And you could think of it as it was a little startup within Marvin Innovation Hub. And their approach to problem solving and design it's called human-centered. So it's a human-centered or design thinking. And it actually refers to a process where you intimately understand the why or the pain points of individuals. So meeting with you, immersing in your environment, right? And in that, there's opportunities to design better experiences. And so what they do then is that they actually prototype and bring solutions to life to address the need, make sure it resonates, meets your need, and then you can actually commercialize it or build it. So it's this really specialized team of individuals who don't just daydream, right? They understand needs, they build solutions,
So
And
would this be like the modeling where you have like 3D printers and you have
you
essentially
could,
like, is it, how does it correlate with like a little bit of R&D? I mean, are they trying to solve stuff like your husband, like engineering and like solving it? Or is it both experience? Like
it's experience too. So
yeah,
it does, it's not necessarily, we have industrial designers.
Mhm.
We do have R&D people who work in this space. So yeah, it's product design, but it also could be just how do architects find information better on Marvin's website?
Which, by the way, I've been told by a variety of people is one of the best in the industry.
Oh,
One of my questions to you actually was, I feel like you guys have a very, when I say you guys, Marvin has an incredible website. It's very clean. It's very intuitive. And I've talked to a number of architects and I've just asked them out of curiosity from the Curious Builder's point of view. I said, why do you, and I'm of course in Minnesota, so I can't speak to the rest of the country.
right.
But we do have a lot of world-renowned architects in Minnesota.
Right here in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's interesting. I've had a few architects on and, you know, a lot of them, 40 to 60% of their work is out of state, which is interesting. And I'll hear often that, you know, they'll spec Marvin. And I asked them why. And they said, because the website is so intuitive and it's so easy for them to find. And they referenced a different window company. And they said, you know, that website, as much as they may or may not like the product, it was just too cumbersome for them because that particular website was maybe geared more towards retail or whatever. It depends. I don't remember which manufacturer they're referring to, and it doesn't matter. But the point was really a compliment to you
nice
that
to
it was
hear.
very intuitive. And the architects all unanimously said, hey, Marvin's doing a great job with the website. And I had it pulled up earlier on the, you know, on our screen here. And I was just looking at it. And it's like, it's very clean. It's very well done.
Well, it's not, I'll have to share that with the team. Well,
Yeah.
they might hear it on the podcast too. But
yeah.
so, the architect has always been also, I talk about it's an ecosystem, right? Of, you know, you have your dealer, you have the homeowner, custom builder, architect. And the architect is very important in the journey as well. And, you know, specifying, helping find the right solutions and ensuring that we have the right information, the right products, that we're creating frictionless experiences for them matter.
How does that work? Speaking of architects, so I would assume you have an architectural rep.
We do.
And so how does
We have several.
You have several, just for the state or for the country or what?
Sorry, for the country. And I don't know how many across the country, but we do have, we call them our APMs, but architectural project managers. And their focus is working with the architects.
So they're doing lunch and learns. I know that's a common thing where basically they'll take out.
That's right.
They'll go to an architecture's firm and they'll say, hey, you know, I'd love for a couple hours, I'll bring in lunch and I just want to show you what our product is, answer any questions. Is that?
Well, technically, in order to get credit for the architect, because they need continuing education credits, it has to be brand agnostic. So it's typically on, I'm going to make this up, but on glazing technologies or energy efficiency or lighting and well-being. So for that session, in order to get the credits, it's more of just a generic educational opportunity. Then once it ends, and there's questions on a product, there's the opportunity to, you know, stay after and talk to architects about needs they have, challenges, or if they have product questions.
Interesting. I didn't know that. I've heard that before with designers. I guess, I mean, it makes sense that an architect would keep their license. I mean, I have to, for my building license,
You have to keep it up.
Yep, I have to keep my licensing up as well. That's really interesting. What, one of the questions that I had for you as well is, you know, when you're, you know, one of the things that was really appealing going back to being even in War Road, like when the town shuts down, one thing I really enjoyed was that, you know, everyone turns out for everything. Like the War Road is very well known for hockey, right?
Yes.
And so, you know, like the entire town goes to every event. And so, do you take, I don't know how, you know, it's kind of like the chicken and the egg or cart and the horse, but like, you have Marvin and then you have the community, which it doesn't seem like you can really take the two apart, which is good. It's not and so my question, I guess, is this, is how has those community values really kind of, because I'm sure I'm not the only one that has made this observations, because what do people outside of Minnesota who don't know Marvin, what do they say about, are they able to still feel the community even though they don't know maybe the War Road story, or is that even a part of the marketing or the branding? I guess what I'm trying to get at is, how are you able to, I don't want to use leverage in a negative way, it's a positive thing, but like, how are you able to really amplify the community and Marvin together, both in taking community values and importing them into Marvin as a company, and then taking that and kind of exporting it across the United States and the world as a positive brand?
It's really interesting because it's just, my cousin and I talk about this quite a bit. It's part of who we are. Like, without the community, there would have been no Marvin. The community stuck by us during hard times. We stuck by the community during hard times. And my grandfather always said that if you have to take care of your customers, and then it's will be taken care of, right? Yep. I mean, profit's important because then you're growing, and you need growing to do more good, whatever your value creation is you want to create in the world. But if you don't take care of your customers, there's no company, and if there's no company, there's no community.
Right.
And so there is this dependency, and I think a respect on how it all works, and it's just part of our fabric and who we are. The
you
world.
Have to think about it. It ends up being just like all the way down.
It is, and Warroad is an important part of Marvin. Where we come from, who we are, and where we're going. And I just want to bring up one of the really important things of why you still headquartered in this rural town in northwestern Minnesota. It's where we're from, and where we're from. There's a commitment there, and when you have senior leadership there, it makes a difference. And when a town's small, you can see the ripple effect of your decision making. You're not in an office somewhere in a different city. Mm-hmm. You see it firsthand. And there's just been a number of times too where I see my cousin who's CEO, and the values guide his decision making. But he always thinks, how do my decision making, I want to be able to go in the grocery store and look people in the eyes, right? And you can see the ripple effect of the choices you make, the decisions you make. And I think it keeps you really grounded on what's important, mm-hmm. the difference you make, and the difference you want to continue to foster.
It's funny. Someone else had said this, and I believe it very much to be true, but it was just that culture trumps strategy. And I think a little bit, the culture that you have mm-hmm. developed and the community has developed obviously has done wonders, I assume, for the company. I mean, you guys are a growing company. And one of my questions for you is, and maybe this is just because I'm from Minnesota. Mm-hmm. I just assume. I mean, I know the three main you have Anderson, Pella, and you have Marvin, right? I mean, but we have a plethora of world-class windows within
right here,
within like a couple hundred miles of Minneapolis. So what my question is, and maybe you know the answer to this, is why do we have three of the top window companies in the world located so close to each other? Was there some unknown advantage that Minnesota had and in the surrounding areas because of our climate, and so we had to build windows to a harder degree? Any idea why Minnesota is at the epicenter of? Or am I wrong?
No, you're right. Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Pella being in Iowa, and then there's one just across the Canadian border.
Lowen.
Yep, north of Warroad. There's no question though that if you go back to the 1900s, the lumber industry, and we were leading in it. And white pine was a significant resource and it was used for building materials. And so we had this a little bit of a resource advantage and opportunity. But I think if you would ask any single one of those manufacturers, their origin story is going to look a little bit different. Mm-hmm. For us, it wasn't so much going back to the late 1930s about like making windows and doors. It was, okay, there was a resource. We had an employee who had an idea on how to provide jobs. The idea happened to be barn satch, but it was more about job creation than it was the window and door part of it. But that was the seed that then
I want to think early on, saying yes.
Saying yes.
Right.
Yep, saying yes. And it worked. It kept people in Warroad.
Interesting. I mean, if you don't have to do this on the podcast, I'm kind of curious, like outside, because I don't know any other window companies than mm-hmm. those three. I'm going to hear some other ones. Obviously, there's others out there, but it'd be curious to know, like, if you took the 3 or 4 ones that we just named mm-hmm. compared to the rest of the world in terms of market share, or U.S. and then the world. It'd be very curious to see as a group, like what world percentage would they have? Oh, yeah. I don't know. I guess I could Google it.
Yeah, It'd be substantial.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, it's cool. That's what's cool about Minnesota, right? Mm-hmm. You touched on an important point. In fact, I think they talked about that in the tour. Just our propensity for obviously wood and natural resources, and so and then of course the river system. I mean, we have a lot of lakes, and so it'd be easy to transport wood back in the early 1900s before we had all these developed roads too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're right. It's a resource. I mean, obviously, if we were in New Mexico, it'd be a different business story, right. So I do think the lumber, white pine, that whole industry is kind of behind a lot of the opportunities we saw emerge.
Yep. Interesting. Now, your lumber now, out of curiosity, does that come up out of Canada? Is that the state owned? Like, does it come from a variety? You have so many windows.
It comes from a variety, but mainly Pacific Northwest.
Yep.
And then no old growth trees are used in Marvin
Is that
wood
like
products.
is that like a sustainability thing?
It's sustainability, and then just I think an overall philosophy. But
Yep.
the wood comes from a variety of places. But
I mean, it would make sense
Yeah.
considering your demands. um, talk us a little bit about technology. So like, basically over the last couple of decades, what are some major evolutions in Windows? 'Cause I think a lot of people just don't even understand like maybe Windows, right? Like, hey, it's a window, but I mean, the gas, the tinting.
Oh, it's insane.
I don't hardly even know, but I think for those out there, name a few things that we now take for granted that maybe 2 decades ago didn't exist. And then my follow-up question would be like, where do you see, what are the next things coming up?
So can I tell a story really quickly? We
Yeah.
have one of our engineers up north. He was an engineer at Rolls-Royce.
Oh, wow.
And which it sounds really fancy, but
It
I mean
does.
the point though is he saw a lot of ingenuity and design and different complexities. And he's like, well, I'm gonna come to Marvin and it's wood and glass. And he came here and he said, this isn't wood and glass. It's so much beyond that. And I think over the past couple decades, probably what we've seen most is glass and the role glass plays in the overall energy performance and comfort of your home. You mentioned tinting. There's so many tinting options, but as a homeowner, hopefully you don't get overwhelmed because the process is nice where we can kind of direct you to the right, the right configuration for your climate and elevation. But just glass, the coatings, the gas that goes inside to keep it comfortable and to keep your windows performing. Believe it or not, the sizes of windows now, today, compared to 10 years ago and 20 years ago, it's a different ballgame. Think about those scenic doors, those big doors you see that open up an entire wall or a partial wall.
Like the big lift and slides.
They're called lift and slides. Yep. They're called multi-slides, bifolds. I mean, doors are going 10, 12 feet now. And you're not compromising energy efficiency. So you're going bigger, but design, right? In the frame and the sash and the panels and the glass are allowing you to also have energy efficiency so that if you're in northern Minnesota or Minnesota,
yeah,
and you want one of those big doors, you still stay comfortable during the winter.
Right.
Door sizing, I mean, even since 2017, unit sizing has increased 10% just since 2017. And products only going to get bigger and bigger.
I think the ingenuity in the engineering department is incredible. I mean, I remember, and my dad built far less complicated homes than I build, but I mean, they didn't even have engineers review their plans. You would draw a draftsman to draw your plan, whatever you could just make it work. I mean, now everything has to be, braced wall paneling, and, most of the homes that we're building now are, a whole wall, might be glass. We're very much so talk about insulation and, the thermal envelope and air penetration. But, if an entire side of your house, especially facing a lake or something, is all glass, like, there's just not a lot of R value in that. No. And so, so now it's all engineering and glass, and people love that look. But to your point, we also still need it to perform.
We need it to perform.
When it's negative 20 in January, which is a prime time to come visit Minnesota. So please come.
It's a special time.
Yeah.
So I think, and the other thing too, in order to get that big, I mean, glass is getting bigger. So there's innovation in glass and equipment to make glass that's bigger. And then composites for your panels, for your frames. There's aluminum and wood historically, and now we're seeing different kinds of composites that have more structural strength and are allowing you to go bigger. So it's really, really fascinating on that side of it. And then what I see coming, and we're seeing it a little bit now with skylights and the larger doors, is automation.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that the window and door side of the building industry has been a little bit lagging in terms of not innovation. It might be a little bit of market readiness too and costs, but I think now you're seeing not just security systems, but you're seeing the ability with the push on your button on your phone or on the wall to operate large product. And I think it's just a matter of time too before we see windows, awnings, casements, more as standard offerings that have motorization and that can be controlled for the convenience factor with the...
I mean, I think you're right. You see in home automation for, securities and cameras and all this stuff. I mean, I do see a generation, we I mean, it's a stereotype, I think that's changing, but a lot of the older generation that saw the first gen of automation, the intercoms on the walls and stuff is like, oh, that's just ended up being junk and outdated. I feel like now, as long as your hardwiring is good, you can update a lot of that. I feel like now the technology is finally in a place where you can rely on some mechanical stuff. So you could have an entire 16-foot wall window slide, move at a push of a button, and then trust that it would obviously work.
Yeah, I think there's a sophistication and maturity that we're seeing with product. And the other thing too, I mean, we're seeing dynamic glazing has been around for a long time, especially in commercial buildings, not so much in residential, but I think what's before us and what's at our doorstep is more dynamic glazing. So,
and what do you mean by that?
Dynamic glazing but the flip of a switch, your glass can go to tinted
we saw that
darkened.
In your corporate offices, right? Like the privacy thing where it would go private.
The great thing about being a manufacturer of windows and doors and then being able to renovate some workspaces for employees is that you get to prototype and play with different technologies. But that's exactly right.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I remember, I've heard before, I don't know how far they got in development. It was 10, 15 years ago I saw this, but it was for a home down Scottsdale, Arizona or something like that, where, you have solar heat gain and then maybe, how would the window darken to not have stuff fade. I don't know where that technology is at now. I just remember kind of being like, it was an R&D lab and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Yes. Did that ever end up taking off across other window brands, or is that they're still working on concepts like that?
I think there's still concepts like that, and you'll find homes that have those kind of technologies too. But I think what you're going to see is various type. I call it dynamic glazing, and they all have different configurations. But they're right on. They're coming forward in the residential market for a different experience for the homeowner inside. And not all homeowners are looking for shades or curtains, or they want something a little bit more seamless. And so the future is exciting for a window and door and what it means for your comfort and experience in the home.
As far as where Marvin plays, obviously being Minnesota, we've already kind of talked a lot about that, but across the country, what are you seeing in terms of trends? I know, we operate in a higher end, so most of our product has to be wood. I know fiberglass and vinyl are big products across the country, but what do you see in other parts of the country in terms of what you're shipping? And then what do you think that Marvin, really excels at, across the country?
It's a good question. So I'll answer it just in terms of like, what are we seeing as far as trends?
Yeah,
what I would say honestly is we have a strong foothold in wood traditional offerings, customization. We also see the rise of like clean, modern products. So large windows, large window walls, large doors. And there's always the black window frame conversation and that sort of thing. We're actually seeing some of that soften to more grays and whites again. So that's more of a trend thing.
Yep.
But what are the things that are going to stay? And I think it's new construction and major remodel mainly. Things are going bigger. We're seeing more doors per order than we have before. So thinking about the seamless connection from inside and out.
And where I was going with the question, you answered it in a way that I do like. But one of the questions I had was you have different lines of windows, and do you see an explosion of I don't know, I'm just throw out some numbers hey, the southern part of the United States because of termites or whatever, we see a dramatic increase in let's say vinyl or fiberglass products. Mainly just curious.
Go ahead. It depends on the home. Actually, the style of home typically shapes the look. And the look can shape the material.
Yep.
But I would say if we take a step back, the largest, there's the vinyl market in which, we don't play. But then the aluminum wood clad market from a market share perspective is still significant across the country. It's big. It's not growing as rapidly.
Any idea what the difference between, let's say, wood or wood, covered aluminum or whatever versus vinyl? If you just have two, vinyl versus wood, what would that be in the United States? Any idea?
A market share split? Oh, it'd be substantially more vinyl. 70-30?
Or hard to know?
Oh, I'm not good on the spot like that, but I mean, it's probably 50% vinyl.
And I'm super biased. The reason I'm asking the question is I have no idea because I've never done. I think I'm 95% wood. I mean, I don't know if I've ever done anything other than that. So I'm just I just don't have good perspective of, and I know there's other obviously products out there.
And it's different based on the segment you play, where
Of
you
course.
do see more aluminum clad and
Yep.
composites, but we are seeing a rise in composite.
Yep.
It's not as big as aluminum clad, but it's growing, and it's growing year after year. And so composite can be, we often talked about fiberglass from Marvin, but just in general in market, it's just known for being highly thermally efficient, very strong material, very
right?
structurally
Isn't in
sound.
apartment buildings, I'd heard something like over 4 stories, certain fiberglasses are rated where other kind of, I mean, there's a structural factor
There's a structural
to it as
factor
well, right?
for sure.
Yeah.
So what I would say is that we do see the rise, and Marvin is part of it too in composites, and we're vertically integrated. So we have our own material innovation center, and we also create a lot of our own composites, and we have for 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of our core competencies, and so it's a growing solution that builders, homeowners are looking for, and architects.
How do you handle overseas? I mean, does Marvin end up selling stuff overseas, or?
We do, and we sell into Canada and overseas, but I would say it's more of a more opportunistic. We have some really key partners, but I wouldn't say that's a big focus of us, because there's so much impact to be had even domestically yet. The other thing is that windows and doors are complex, and there's different codes and regulations that drive window design, that drive performance. In Japan, because of density, things need to be fire rated in different ways. And so, the moment you start going worldwide, and if you can take what you make today,
right,
and it works in that country, that's fabulous. But it'd be a pretty big investment.
I see.
To truly, it's doable. It's for us, that's not on our near term.
I was just curious because I've never asked the question before, and not knowing how far the window reach. Right now we've already talked about Minnesota being kind of the hub of windows in North America anywhere, I think. I'd be kind of curious to see how far it goes from there. One thing that's kind of interesting is I know that the Pareto Homes just celebrated their 75th anniversary, and a lot of our local contributors have helped be a part of that. Certainly Marvin, all the other window companies as well, and just people in general. What has, let's say, the Artisan Tour in particular done for your brand and your relationship with builders, let's say in the Minnesota, Minneapolis area? Because that's the Artisan brand, for those not from Minnesota, is basically a higher end brand. There's maybe 20 homes on tour that range anywhere from $1.5 million to, let's say, 10 million. And I know it's a big part of your marketing campaign, at least from my perspective, because that's the group that I'm in. I was just curious from a marketing strategy, how that came to be and how valuable you find that relationship.
Very valuable. I remember it's been years ago, talking to one of our regional managers, territory managers, when it was starting to take root. And for us, it's always been, we're here to support our builder partners, our custom builder partners, our dealers, and architects. But what you do is that these programs have Marvin product in it. And so we want to be there to show up and support. And there's typically several of the homes that have Marvin. So for us, it's an opportunity to demonstrate commitment and, to be honest, celebrate beautiful construction and beautiful design that raises a bar and elevates it in the state.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think I can feel that as well. I mean, you see, regardless of, I just think we have a lot of pride in these tours, right? And certainly thankful for Marvin's support, and really anyone that supports any of these home tours, regardless of what market you're in the country, because it takes a lot to put it on. I think Housing First, we had James Vagley on a couple weeks ago, and he's amazing. Now he's the president and CEO of Housing First. I didn't realize how long he'd been there. He'd been there for like 15 or 20 years.
Really?
He'd been there for a long time, and he's a great leader. But it's amazing to me just how important home ownership is. To the American dream. I mean, it is the American dream, is to own your home. And it's just interesting to see how many people it affects. And obviously, this is a construction podcast, so I'm a little biased here. Yeah. But it's really a beautiful thing to watch, kind of just, many hands make the load light. And so it's just, I really value those that are committed to, whether it's your home tours, your homeowners, all realizing that's going to continue to come back to you and support the industry.
Yeah. Yep. And to show up and be there for support. I 100% agree.
Yeah. What are you seeing in terms of brand relationships? So you obviously, I think Marvin's a pretty big brand in terms of windows. How do you, from a marketing standpoint, how do you align yourself with either other builders, or talk to us a little bit about brand management? One of the things that I'm just interested in those listening sometimes are thinking like, how do we approach a brand like Marvin? So I guess two things. One is, how do you seek out brand partners and who you find that represents you? And then two, if there's builders out in the community or across the country, how would they interact with their local Marvin teams and Marvin reps to kind of see if their brand works well to kind of work together essentially?
Yeah. And there's a lot that can be done on the local level as far as brand partnerships too. I'll pick on Chicago, and if we have a great dealer there, we have a great builder, architectural partner, and there's opportunity. Typically, that surfaces through our field marketing teams, through our local territory managers, and sometimes there's just direct outreach. We have this project, we have this idea, and so there's that angle of it, and then there's to be honest, we've been so fortunate in that we have the opportunity to work with so many amazing people in the trade. And we often find ourselves in a position where people are reaching out. I mean, even influencers. We have this project, we'd love to use Marvin. And if we can make things work, it's always fantastic. We love celebrating architecture, design, projects that feature Marvin, where Marvin was able to accomplish a vision, a dream, like the story behind it. So I always say, reach out. What does that mean? Yep. Reach out to your local Marvin representative, reach out to the marketing team, share your work, share your story. And we often like to push those stories back out through social, get photography, do interviews, maybe not a podcast. You're a little bit ahead of us there. But storytelling we can capture on video, get people up to Warroad to experience Warroad. There's so many paths. But I would say the design matters, and then the values alignment too, and having impact. And we love shining a light on it.
Right. No, it goes back to storytelling, right? I mean, essentially all these things come back to one thing, like whatever brand you are, in this case, Marvin, you want to tell your story and you have a compelling story to share. What, from a social media standpoint, just because obviously that's the world we live in, where, continues, it's like, how many platforms can we manage at one time? And at least you have a company where we have
a team.
I mean, I'm like one person trying to navigate this world. And I remember because I'm not a big Twitter guy, and I'm just like, oh man, I mean, does everyone need to think know what I'm thinking like every 30 minutes? No, they don't. And so anyway, the point is like, there's so many different, we personally do a lot on, Instagram and LinkedIn and of course our website. But I mean, how do you stay on top of that as a company?
The team, we have a fabulous team. Yep. So within our marketing team, we have individuals who specialize in social content. There's metrics, right? There's tracking we do. We also work with outside agencies to ensure that we're staying fresh, and that we can see what's coming, what's happening, and that we work with them to maximize what our investments are, because you can't put everything everywhere. So you have to be strategic in prioritization. It's important that we hear from builder partners, that we hear from architects on, like, when homeowners are showing up, what sources are they using, and making sure that, we're there. So important platforms are Pinterest. Pinterest is still used quite a bit. Instagram is significant. LinkedIn for other purposes, especially on the professional side. But it's luckily we have a really strong team there.
Right. That's interesting to say that about Pinterest, because I, maybe 5-6 years ago, we used to use Hows a lot. And so people would often, I'd encourage my clients to like create a book so that the team, the designers, we'd all kind of have one portal to look at. And obviously Pinterest is very popular among our clients, especially the female clients in particular. It seems like our women are just like, yes, this is what we use. And so in some ways we've kind of gone away from Hows, and Pinterest has been
that's a trend
more
we've seen
prevalent. And it was interesting. So about 6 months ago, I didn't even have a Pinterest account. So I'm like, well, we better create one. And I just had someone, an assistant, basically post like 10 pictures a day. We now have 120,000 followers on Pinterest. I'm like, what?
120,000?
Yeah, and that's like crazy. I'm like, in 6 months.
Wow.
But here's what's really interesting. I just did our metrics a couple of weeks ago. 70% of all our website hits are from coming. So I didn't realize that essentially Pinterest, whether you use it or not, is like a Google engine for searching.
And it drives.
Traffic
Yes.
to your website. Now, as a small company, I'm not necessarily monetizing my website. It's not really how I'm set up in terms of like, we are developing that, right? We've got blogs and we've got other things to obviously track SEO, but I'm still learning some of this stuff. And it's like, again, I'm a small company. So it's like, how many hats can I possibly wear at one time? Turns out a lot. But from a company's point like yours, you have a team that can focus on this.
We have a team that can focus.
Yeah. Now, are they bringing the reports to you, or like, how does this marketing team look? I love marketing. So I love understanding like, how does the magic happen in the room?
The magic happens because this is what I firmly believe. I just pave the way for the teams. I get out of the way when I need to, and I make sure that I remove barriers and set them up for success. And I hire people smarter, better, and stronger than me. And so the magic happens because we have a wonderful VP of marketing. I have a wonderful PR leader who's here with me. And then the team is strong. We have such a strong team. So like, to be honest, the magic is in the people. The magic is in the people. The magic is understanding the brand, the opportunity, thinking bigger, using metrics to drive, right, and behavior.
Seeing what works.
To drive, see what works. But I firmly believe when you have a good team, anything's possible.
Yeah. Maybe as we go into close, we usually will end the interviews with just a few things. 'Cause I always think this is helpful for aspiring entrepreneurs. Maybe is there anything that if you were to start a business again, or if you were to encourage somebody to, if they're thinking about, basically starting their own business, from what you've seen, because you interact with so many businesses, is there anything that you would say, hey, I think this would be a good thing to consider, or this is something that's really meant a lot to you to, when you maybe hit a wall, or when you want a new idea, this is maybe something that helps, kind of inspire you that way?
There's two things. One, and it's the way I'm wired. I reach out and I talk to people.
Yeah. Ask for help.
I ask for help. I get ideas, and I talk to many, many individuals, because not one conversation will solve your own situation. So you have to, for me, I have an input.
Yep.
Kind of not ability, but the way I'm wired. And so I take it all and I try to make sense for what I have today. What I have in front of me. The other thing that for me just started resonating in the last 5 years is this idea of like strategy and structure. So you have a strategy and you want to get something done or initiative, but then let's say it's not moving. So do you have the right team members with the right skill sets, with the right focus, helping advance it? And if you don't, then you have to have a conversation on like that person matters, and that capability really, really matters. Because either it may not be something someone enjoys to do, you may not have the person, they may not be the right skill set, their skills and gifts lie elsewhere. And so I've really gotten to the point to think about, okay, if we're stuck, what's getting in the way? The strategy's still good and we're just not getting movement. How do you get someone, or bring in an outside resource from a contract perspective to get you unstuck and get it moving?
That's good advice. We're actually doing that right now.
Oh, are you?
Yeah. I mean, just from the standpoint, I think what you've just said is analogized with, do you have the right people in the right seats on the bus, or do you need a different person in a different seat?
Yeah.
They might be on the bus and there might be the right person. So anyway, just trying to figure that out as a business owner.
Yeah.
What are some ways that you like to self-educate, or, how do you stay kind of fresh on, it sounds like you talk to a lot of people and get all these ideas, but is there any, I always find it interesting to ask people how, is it reading? Is it podcasts? Is it travel? Like what inspires
travel?
you?
It's harder with the kiddos.
Yep.
Not harder. It's just, I want to make it's different, and I want to make sure I'm showing up for the kids, because those years go by quickly. And so that's really important. But for me, I am an experiential learner. So I do admit it, like talking to people. I love reading articles. I'm more of a kind of an article person, and maybe because they're shorter to the point.
Sure.
So I leverage that quite a bit. I love going to different speaking events when there's strong speakers. But for me, it's all about relationships and learning from others.
Yep. Yep. Interesting. Well, thank you very much for your
thank you.
time. Very much appreciate it. And yeah, for those that are listening, we can go to marvin.com. Is that the right website?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that works.
easy. Marvin.com. That's pretty easy. So we'll have all your credentials in the show notes as places that they can look and, give them a look. And thanks again for all your time today, Christine.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. All right. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the Curious Builder podcast. If you like what you listen to, please give us a 5-star rating and write us a review. It really means a lot. It's a great way for us to just understand what you like about the podcast and what we can keep doing. So like and review, and please share with your friends and family. Find out more at curiousbuilderpodcast.com.